Hey, what's up, guys? Evan Aldo here. Man, so very boring week, and then all of a sudden today, Bitcoin kind of breaks down to the volume area low, which, we've been in that range, so we broke down to the range. ETH looking maybe a little bit worse, bleeding against Bitcoin, right now. So finally a little bit of excitement. I think there's a lot of people that probably try to enter shorts, trying to short down, and I don't think it's a bad idea necessarily. Just be careful because you're kind of coming into a weekend, you're getting into the summer now. Would summer start today or something? So you got a lot of, things that may make it a little bit hard to trade right now. I kind of took an info on this. If you guys are interested in the Discord, I'll put a link down below. I put in a long towards, I saw a nice setup, 15-minute kind of bull div. I put in a long towards that bottom. I gave it a shot. Decent risk reward ratio. Got stopped out of my last one. So, would show you a chart, but I wanted to take a walk, It's so nice out here, kind of the summer. The little summer in Connecticut up here is, kind of nice. So, I won't be here forever. So, but anyway, ultimately saw that good setup. So gave that a shot there. Sometimes the market, even if you're getting into the summer lull right now that I've talked about, where Bitcoin generally corrects, 20 to 30%, and every summer since I can remember, since I've been really following this, mapping this out, I think 2020, maybe even beforehand. I think it topped out in end of July of 2019. So, July, August, you always see that kind of summer lull. Even if it crashes in May, like in 2021, it still stayed sideways. So kind of a summer lull, if you get what I'm saying. So you may be getting that now where, Bitcoin goes down 20%, maybe even 30% or something. You'd probably be back in the low 90s, 80s or something sometime in July, and then you'd probably recover. ETH, I think, could hold up better. The charts would definitely support that. I wouldn't see that dropping down much below 2,000. It would make sense that you would get your 2,000, like your 2,000 correction for ETH or whatever. That's what would kind of make the most sense there. And then you kind of recover. So, I've been seeing a lot of Twitter posts about people, kind of giving up on alts. You've been seeing that on and off for a while, but more so in this week. I think people are just bored, kind of getting bored because not much is happening. Look, the thing with alts that you got to realize, especially if you're a newer investor, especially if you're not you got to understand there's two main types of investing here. There's value investing and there's venture capitalism. Now, somebody who's more of a risk averse investor would probably say anything crypto is not going to be value investing. It's going to be venture capitalism, which essentially, in venture capitalism, you buy a bunch of different things, and some of them will go to zero, some of them will go sideways, and a couple of them will do 10x to 100x or whatever. And that diversity is what makes you successful at it. I would argue that when you talk about altcoins, ETH kind of is a gray area that's probably in between, but when you talk about altcoins, that's more of a venture capitalism where, a lot of people bought altcoins, and it's kind of, it doesn't make sense here because a lot of people bought altcoins because of, if you're buying meme coins, no, but they bought altcoins because of fundamentals. And then, they kind of give up on them. But the fundamentals didn't change too much for most of the time. They're kind of the same. So, and if you follow the 4-year cycle, you're already halfway through that year. You got the Fed probably going to cut in September. If you see what happened the last time the Fed cut, I know it's not always the same, but you see what happened the last time the Fed cut last September, you had a nice rally. So it doesn't really make sense. Unless you're holding complete garbage, meme coins or whatever that you don't want to gamble on anymore. If you got stuff on fundamentals, if it's diversified, it doesn't really make that much sense to sell, in my opinion. Now, can they bleed more against Bitcoin? Based on the charts, probably. Will ETH continue, or will ETH make a lower low against Bitcoin? Probably not. Pretty unlikely. Anything could happen, sure. Pretty unlikely. So that's when you look at it. And then what I said about earlier, I want to hopefully this isn't too unorganized, but value investing. Bitcoin and ETH to a certain extent are more value investing, where that's kind of where if you just buy and hold long enough, and that's what most, Bitcoin maxi or that philosophy, that view on it, if you just buy and hold and you got some patience there, it's what they tell you with the S&P. It's kind of like buying the S&P 500 to a certain extent. Obviously, that's going to be more risk averse. But, you buy and hold, I don't know, what did they tell you, 20, 30, 40 years or whatever. It'll be higher than it was, when you originally bought it, which is kind of how that works. Or Bitcoin, they could kind of follow the 4-year cycle. You hold 4 years or whatever it may be. If you guys heard me talk about a lot, I've never really seen an asset class. I mean, it's happened, but it's not that common. An asset class keeps doing incredibly well for more than 20 years. Bitcoin came out around, 2009, going on to its 20th year anniversary. I don't think you're going to see a 2030s that gives you the gains that the 2010s and 2020s gave you. I just don't think so. I think that's the pattern we kind of follow. It'd be nice, it'd be really nice. A lot of people would get really, really, really rich. I'd say the same thing for the housing market, the same thing for S&P 500. A lot of people have been riding that up for 15 years now. Since 2011, well, the bottom was 2009, but you get my drift. For housing, it was didn't do much. Really, the housing market was, 2011. You've been riding that up for 15 years. How many more years do you have left before you see an next correction? Probably a couple more years, 3 to 5 years, I would guess. And you kind of follow that pattern. So that's kind of what Bitcoin is. And then you'd probably see kind of a sideways equity for Bitcoin. I think you'd see, probably that kind of 8-year bear market or whatever. It depends how you define a bear market, but like 8-year market where maybe you wash away more of the nonsense. You're seeing some of the nonsense wash away in crypto. There's some weird, I guess you could argue the Trump meme coin, Melania meme coin, that stirred things up a little bit. I don't know. Crazy times we live in, I'll tell you that much. But man, just thinking about it a little bit more. I mean, it's interesting to think, but if you see in that 2030s, you see that kind of, you wash away some things. I mean, who knows? NFTs, maybe that won't be relevant anymore. Maybe they'll succeed and come back. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I hold a couple, as some of you guys know. I think there's some potential, but be careful. It's all about that diversification and that profile. So, I mean, the thing on alts right now is, if you believe in the fundamentals, if you got a diversified portfolio, I don't think it really makes sense to sell unless your fundamentals changed, unless, something had good fundamentals and a lot of bad news came out and a lot of things got a lot worse. It doesn't really make sense to sell, in my opinion, from that venture capitalism strategy. But if you're trying to move over to a value investing strategy, just go all, Bitcoin and ETH, kind of that. And I got some videos, kind of following the 4-year cycle and all that, trying to, hedge in the right way. One of them, long story short, is kind of, you hold on to ETH, until towards the end of this year. Try to run that Q4 rally if you get that Q4 altcoin season, which is where I would think you would see at least something like what happened in 2023. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's different this time. Maybe everything, goes down. Who knows? But you kind of follow that and you scale out there, convert to something safer and what would likely be the bear market year 2026. Maybe gold, maybe S&P 500, maybe half and half. And then you convert back to Bitcoin. If Bitcoin's back at, let's say, 50K sometime in 26, get you some nice Bitcoin, get a full Bitcoin maybe more, maybe a couple Bitcoin. It depends how much ETH. I did it with like 15K ETH. You probably get over 15. If you start with 15K ETH, get a double, 30K. You'd need more than a double, but you get my point. I do think that, now I'm kind of rambling, but I do think that you probably will see a decent, not a terrible S&P 500 year in 2026. I was watching, I think it was CNBC. It just happened to be on in the background, and like it was some commercial for like buy my indicator or something. It was a commercial. The guy was like saying in the commercial, like, it was kind of funny because it was one of those like really scammy ones, and everybody knows it's kind of BS generally. But as they were saying, like, this indicator got all this right with the S&P 500 or whatever with the stock market, and it said 2025 will be a good year, and then 2026 is going to be the crash. That's probably just following some 4-year cycle kind of thing, I would guess. But kind of for a stock market too, because you look at the cycle, it was 2018 was, red for the stock market, but the 4 years before there, 2014 was not red. I think it might be kind of like that, but I'm just speculating here. I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of hard to say, but oh wow. Yeah. So that's kind of the main thing I have right here. The interesting, what I'll end right here is like, if Bitcoin can jump kind of from where we're then low this range, then you kind of have a bit of a bullish case, maybe into early July, and then you're still talking about ETH to 3,200. I think we're going to see more of that answer next week. I believe it's going to be the last week of June already. So I got a week or two to see, what it gives us. Some good things. Fear and greed is not very high. Funding rates are not very high. So, I mean, some people have been commenting, it kind of feels different. The markets feel different. There's more apathy. Definitely true. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, my guess is things will come back. My guess is a lot of interest will come back. And it's going to be more like it was, but we'll see. There's always lulls and always, different things here. I think a lot of people, monetary policy too, Powell kind of going hard in that monetary policy, but I feel like that the more you kind of hold the string back, the more you kind of hold I don't know what's the analogy I'm looking for, the spring, the more you hold and push the spring back, the more you pump up the BB gun before you shoot. When you finally shoot in quarter 4 in September, most likely, then it goes up. So you could be waiting a long time, and then you get that altcoin break-even season, or that altcoin season, or whatever you want to call it. So anyway, guys, smash the like button. Check out the Discord down below if you want to interested in some of my trades. I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.